Hello everyone. In order to be data-driven, we have to become data-entren, and it's important to make sure data is always entered. This session is a demo of how to query data from Microsoft Dataverse, for example, when you're using Dynamics 365 CRM or other Dataverse-based application to manage your sales process and customer engagement, and then display it in graphs to build a dashboard for decision making. The first graph will be total activity count by type, for example, calls, emails, etc., month to date, and then another graph is the total by activity type for the past half year to date, and the last graph is total of all activities by month for a current year. I will use Power Automate and Power Apps for the dashboard solution. Flow. The idea is to query data from Dataverse and do the aggregations in Power Automate, so we don't have issues with the Power Apps threshold on the number of records that we can return at once from a data source, and plus the flow as a layer of abstraction from the view allows us to do other relevant data manipulations and return to the Power App only what's required. So we proceed to creating a flow. This is the Power Automate flow, and we are starting it by creating a trigger from Power Apps. The first activity is to create an array variable, which is queries, and the first query is we will be using fetch XML to query data from Dataverse. And it's just simple activity pointer query where created on date is this month. So we are adding this query to our array. Then the next one is last 6 months. We also again add this to queries array. And then there is other query, which is activity pointers, but we group them straight away. So there is aggregation, so aggregate equals true. And then we make a count of all activities based on month. So here we specify the attribute created on, which is created date, and the group by true, and date grouping equals month for this year. Then we do the aggregate output array, which will allow us to aggregate the final query results. Then there is a counter variable, which I'll show you how it is used later. So what I'm doing here is that I'm looping all the queries in an array, so we kind of do this a bit dynamically, so we don't just call it one after another. So imagine we have multiple queries, so we can execute it in the same manner. So we put them in the array and then loop through the array to execute. So here, list rows, which is connected to my Dataverse instance, and I'm querying activities table with the current item, which is the query. What I'm doing next is that I'm selecting activity type from the results that are returned, and that's the actual value that I'm getting from the items. So when I get all this done, what I'm doing is that I'm doing a union. So I'm only returning the distinct values. After I've done that, what I'm doing is that I'm getting the current activity type and filter the total selection by the current activity type, right? Why I'm doing this? So I get the count So this is my formula for count. So that's the way I'm counting the specific activity type, because what the length is a size of the array, and because I'm returning an array of objects or a collection, the length in this case, because so what I'm doing for every activity type, my count is actually the length of the array. I've done this to reduce the speed of processing, because there is no way natively in CRM to query or to get the count of the activity types, because activity type is option set in CRM. So I did this solution to overcome this obstacle. So then series, so I mark the series number by the counter, and I'll show you how it's used in the future. So then I increment the counter, so my series are marked for every different query differently. And then in the end, I'm doing the final query to do the month output, because it's slightly different. And then I get an aggregation, and I'm returning the activity count result for each month. So this is just to log, so if I need to, when I test my workflow, or if I need to see when it's executed, what is being returned. And then I add the HTTP response activity to return back the result set. It's very important to add the JSON schema, and what I'm returning is a value, which is an integer. In this case, it's the count of activities. Type means what the activity type, month, which month for the last query, and series, in my case, it will be numbers from 1 to 3. And that's how the Power Automate flow is built for my scenario. This is the Power Apps part, where we build Canvas application and display data in the charts. So this is quite simple. I added the column chart or bar chart to the app, and what I'm gonna do, just to simplify the demo, I'll just on the button click, I'm just gonna call my Power Automate flow that was created previously. So in here, do action, then Power Automate, and it allows me to choose the Power Automate flows, which I will then add. So this one was added before, but imagine if it wasn't, I would just simply select it and it would be added into my solution. And what I'm doing is I'm populating the collection called current activities by using clear collect, name of the collection, and then run the Power Automate flow. So when the button is clicked, my collection will be populated. And in my chart, I'm going to select the items, and it's going to be filter current activities, where series equals 1. So when we get the data back, then we will be able to display it. In the column chart properties, for the selected column chart, I would go to Advanced tab, and then in the data section, the labels should be type in this case, and series would be value. So what it will do, it will display a number of activities returned and also their corresponding types. So when we click the button, get the data back, also series number 1 this time doesn't return anything because this month was nothing created in my system, but for half a year I have some data. So when I change to series equals 2, I've got nice chart displaying my statistics. So if I want to change the chart title, I obviously get here and say 6 month to date activities. And that's it. So it's pretty straightforward, simple, easy, and useful.